Here's your host, John, with more classic movie reviews.
Welcome to today's show. My name is John. As always, you can subscribe to the show on iTunes or follow the links to social media in the podcast show notes. You can also go to snarkymoviereviews.com to read notes, bios, and other random movie thoughts. Remember, this show is completely free and independent. All I ask is that you jump over to iTunes and give me a review. Today's movie is a film noir classic directed by Fritz Lang and starring Glenn Ford and Gloria Grahame.
The actors.
Glenn Ford played the lead role of honest Detective Sergeant Dave Bannon. Ford was first covered in episode 35, Blackboard Jungle, 1955. The lovely Gloria Grahame played Debbie Marsh. Grahame was talked about in episode 53, It's a Wonderful Life, 1946. Jocelyn Brando played the role of Katie Bannon. This older sister of Marlon Brando was born in 1919. Jocelyn grew up in Illinois and was plagued by her two alcoholic parents. She started working in theater in Omaha and debuted on Broadway at the age of 22. Her first film role was The China Adventure, 1953. Her best-known film role is The Big Heat, 1953. Jocelyn worked with her famous brother in The Ugly American, 1963, and The Chase, 1966. Jocelyn was more successful on television. Her last film role was Mommy Dearest, 1981. She died at the age of 86 in 2005. Lee Marvin played psychotic gangster Vince Stone. Marvin was first covered in episode 66, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, 1962. Jeanette Nolan played the role of Bertha Duncan, the wife of Detective Duncan. Nolan was covered in episode 66, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, 1962. Willis Boucher played the role of Lieutenant Ted Wilkes, a cop that was a little better than he seemed. Boucher was covered in episode 37, The Violent Men, 1955. Carolyn Jones played the role of Doris. Jones was born in Texas in 1932. She was accepted into the Pasadena Playhouse in 1947. Graduating in 1950, she began working in theater. She signed a 6-month contract with Paramount and was in The Turning Point, 1952, but they dropped her contract. Jones continued to work on television and stage. She made a big splash with her role in House of Wax, 1953. She had another important role in The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1956. She wrote scripts and continued to make movies like The Bachelor Party, 1957, and King Creole, 1958, which featured Elvis Presley. She was excellent in Career, 1959. Jones is best known for her television role of Morticia Addams in The Addams Family, 1964 to 66. The outfit that she wore was later used by Elvira, Mistress of the Darkness, and Vampira. The Addams Family went head-to-head with The Monksters, 1964 to 66, and Bewitched, 1964 to 72. However, the network still canceled the successful show. After the show was canceled, it was 7 years before Jones returned to Hollywood. She was successful on television for a time. Sadly, she died in 1983 from cancer.
Story.
The movie begins with a man killing himself. On his desk is a letter to the district attorney and the dead man's police badge. The man is Tom Duncan, a policeman in charge of records. His wife, Bertha Duncan, Jeanette Nolan, casually comes down the stairs. She takes the letter, opens it, and reads it, and then calls criminal boss Mike Lugana, Alexander Scourby. At the end of the call, Lugana tells Bertha to call the police. Lugana then calls one of his henchmen, Vince Stone, Lee Marvin. The phone is answered by Stone's girlfriend, Debbie Marsh, Gloria Grahame. Stone tells Lugana that he will take care of the request. Sergeant David Bannon, Glenn Ford, goes to the Duncan house and confirms that it was a suicide. Bannon interviews Miss Duncan. She says her husband was clean and may have taken his life because his health was failing, but he never saw a doctor. Bannon's home life is idealistic. His wife, Katie Bannon, Jocelyn Brando, loves her life, and the pair have a young daughter.
Well, how is it?
That's good steak.
Thanks.
I want some beer?
Well, I'll take a sip of yours.
You see, that's exactly what I mean. It's a perfect marriage. We share the same scotch, the same cigarette, the same can of beer.
Among other things.
Bannon gets a call to go meet Lucy Chapman, Dorothy Green, the alleged mistress of the dead cop. Lucy tells Bannon that her and Mr. Duncan were having an affair and that he was planning on leaving his wife. She also lets out that he owns a summer place. Bannon does not believe the B-girl, and she says she will go to the newspapers. Bannon is interested enough that he goes back and sees Mrs. Duncan again. Duncan sticks with her story and says her husband had multiple affairs. She blows up when Bannon asks about how they bought the lake house. Later, Bannon gets a report of a murder matching Lucy Chapman's description. He goes to the morgue and sees that Lucy has been burned all over with a cigarette and tossed out of a car to her death. Bannon is called into the office of Lieutenant Ted Wilkes, Willis Boucher. Wilkes says he is getting pressure from above for Bannon to leave the widow alone. Bannon goes back to the bar where he met Lucy Chapman and starts investigating the murder, although he does not have jurisdiction. The bartender just shines him on, but as soon as Bannon leaves, he calls someone on the phone. Bannon doubles back and tries to find out who he called. No luck, and the bartender knows that Bannon has been warned off already by his superiors. When Bannon returns to his happy home, he starts getting threatening calls. The calls say some big people are getting annoyed. In a rage, Bannon heads over to the mansion of criminal boss Mike Lagana. He is throwing a party and cops are assigned to guard the place around the clock. Lagana is pulling all of the criminal strings in town. Lagana thinks he is there for a police shakedown. He talks about the Lucy Chapman murder and gets really mad that Bannon brought the talk of murder into his house. Bannon beats the hound out of one of the goons sent to throw him out. In the morning, Wilkes starts chewing on Bannon again. Back at home, Bannon is complaining to his wife and calls Wilkes a leaning tower of jelly. Katie Bannon goes to the car, and when she cranks it, the car explodes, killing her. The commissioner, Howard Wendell, and Wilkes call Bannon in after the funeral. His daughter is sent to stay with her mother's family. The commissioner says the explosion was revenge for someone he had previously convicted. They are all afraid to go after Lagana. After Bannon says that the commissioner works for Lagana, he is fired, but he keeps his gun. When Bannon is moving out of his house, Detective Burke, Robert Burton, comes by and says Wilkes has asked him to help. Bannon basically spits in his face. Back at Stone's apartment, Debbie is happily mixing drinks. Stone comes home and he has his toady, Larry, Adam Williams, with him. Shortly after, Lagana shows up. Debbie starts mocking Lagana, calling him the ringmaster.
Check the kitchen, will you, baby?
Sure.
Now it's Debbie. Hup, Debbie, hup, Debbie, hup, Debbie, hup, Debbie, hup, Debbie, hup, Debbie, hup, Debbie.
She's a young girl, Vince.
Yep.
Don't let her drink so much.
If she keeps it up, she goes out of here on her ear. She's got no claim check on me.
Lagana warns Vince about Debbie and her drinking. Vince says she doesn't matter to him. Lagana chews out Larry for dumping Lucy Chapman's body in public and killing the wrong person in the car explosion. Lagana says Miss Duncan has raised her hush price to $500 a week. Bannon goes to a junkyard looking for a bomb maker named Slim. However, Slim is dead and the junk man, Dan Seymour, is no help. After Bannon leaves, the bookkeeper, Edith Evanson, comes out and tells him that she saw the man that came to see Slim and that a man named Larry called and said he could be contacted at the bar where Lucy Chapman had worked, the Retreat. Bannon asked his brother-in-law to call the Retreat at 9 p.m. asking for Larry. Bannon is there so he can see who responds. In the bar, Stone is playing dice with Doris, Carolyn Jones, while Debbie drinks nearby. Stone starts getting mad because Doris is picking up the dice too fast. When she does it again, Stone burns her hand with a cigar. Stone pays Doris off and Bannon throws him out of the bar. Debbie tries to buy Bannon a drink and he says he would choke on it. She follows him out, not being able to stand the rejection. The pair get in a cab and go to Bannon's hotel. Larry is outside in a car and follows him. Bannon tries to interrogate Debbie as she tries to seduce him.
Oh my.
She does mention that she got her legs waxed. Who knew they had that back then? Bannon sends her away in a taxi. When Debbie gets back to Stone's apartment, He is playing cards with Larry, the commissioner, and some other guys. Stone quizzes her on her story and then accuses her of playing footsie with Bannon. I thought of Roger Rabbit. Anyway, Stone pours scalding coffee on one side of her face and neck. Stone makes the commissioner take her to the hospital because he is on the payroll. When Stone reports what happened to Lagana, he orders her murdered. After Debbie gets out of the hospital, she goes to Bannon's hotel. Her face bandage is a precursor to the modern Phantom of the Opera mask. Bannon gets her a room on his floor. Debbie starts telling everything that has gone on, including the political corruption. She mentions Larry, and Bannon jumps on the name, connecting it with the bombing. Debbie realizes that he doesn't care about her, only his own wife's murder. She continues and tells where Larry lives. Bannon gets the bookkeeper to ring Larry's door and then says she has the wrong location. After the door is closed, she lets Bannon know that this is the man that talked to the bomber, Slim. Bannon rings the door and Larry opens it thinking it's the old lady. He is met with a solid punch from Bannon. Bannon, who is no longer a cop, chokes a confession out of Larry. Larry tells that Stone ordered Lucy's murder. Mr. Duncan was on the take, and Miss Duncan is now on the payroll. Sometime later, back at Lagana's house, Stone tells him that he killed Larry as Larry tried to escape to the airport. Stone also says that Mr. Duncan was trying to get out and they had to force him to stay in the racket. His only way out was to kill himself. Lagana orders Stone to kidnap Bannon's daughter. He says he will have the police protection pulled off. About this time, Mrs. Duncan calls Lagana, saying that Bannon is at her door. Bannon accuses her and her dead husband of being on the take. Mrs. Duncan has the evidence set to come out if she dies. Bannon gets ready to kill her, but the police car that Lagana called shows up. Bannon goes back to the hotel and tells Debbie the setup. She wants to know about Bannon's wife, and he only gives her a cold police description. Debbie tells him that if he killed Mrs. Duncan, he would be no better than Stone. Bannon gets a call from his sister-in-law that the police detail has been pulled. He leaves Debbie a gun and heads over. As he climbs the stairs, a man, John Duchette, pulls a gun on him. At the top of the landing, they get into a fight, and Bannon's brother-in-law comes out. He has brought in his old army buddies, and they are defending the house and the little girl. After meeting the guys, Bannon is satisfied that they can protect his daughter.
Do we look like the cast from some maypole dance? I've been places those creeps wouldn't go unless they rode in a 50-ton tank. I went in on foot with
Story of how he won the Medal of Honor or something.
Of course they can. They were in the army. Outside of the house, Detective Burke and Lieutenant Wilkes show up to help. It takes a bit, but they convince Bannon that they are ready to take down the mob. They warn him not to go back and try and kill Mrs. Duncan. Debbie goes to Mrs. Duncan's house, and they both are wearing furs. Debbie tells her that they are sisters under the fur coat.
Did Mr. Stone send you?
No. I've been thinking about you and me. How much alike we are. The mink-coated girls.
I don't understand you. What are you here for, Miss Marsh?
Debbie, we should use first names, Bertha. We're sisters under the mink.
Before she murders her with Bannon's gun. Bannon has staked out Stone's penthouse. When Stone goes upstairs, Debbie throws scalding coffee on his face.
It'll burn for a long time, Vince. It doesn't look bad now. But in the morning, your face will be like mine. Look at it. It isn't pretty, is it?
She shows him her scarred face and tells him that Mrs. Duncan is dead and that Stone and Lagana are headed for a fall. Stone shoots Debbie in the back. Bannon bursts in and has a living room/balcony gunfight. Bannon phones for help. When Stone runs out of bullets, Bannon drags him down. Bannon thinks about killing him, but is too good a cop. Detective Burke and Lieutenant Wilkes show up and take Bannon's gun, thinking he has killed Mrs. Duncan. They arrest Stone, but it's too late to save Debbie. As Debbie dies, Bannon tells her how much she was like his wife. The newspaper shows that Lagana and the commissioner have been arrested. Bannon returns to his police work at the homicide desk.
World-famous short summary.
Straight cop and fancy B-girl almost find love. If you enjoyed this week's show, please tell your friends. And if you really want to help, drop over to iTunes to give me a review. If you want to comment, recommend a movie, or just say hi, follow the links in the show notes to my site. Beware the Moors.
Target that explosion and fire a review.